everybody. I am so sorry for the slight delay. Really also very, very happy to be here. You could press *1 at any time to say hello or to share a question, a thought. Love to hear from you. Somebody asked a really good question after Thursday night's discussion, and today's topic, I think we're going to take it all from there. And I want to encourage everybody to ask your questions, because otherwise you may as well just get this and a recording. But the fact that you're here present and involved right now means that you can get so much more. So let's begin. So if you've been listening and thinking and doing the homework and making connections in your own life, you're probably starting to see a lot of meaningful change, because we're at week 4, Baruch Hashem. Today we begin week 4, and we're at week 4, so that's a big deal. I'd love if anyone's willing to share something that you learned that's meaningful to you, something that you're experiencing differently, and again, press *1 to share. So here's the question that somebody asked, because we've been talking about our worthiness, how each of us, by virtue of having a neshama, is unconditionally worthy and respectable. So the question is that sometimes you feel worthy, but when you get rejected, you feel like you're not worthy enough for that. Your conclusion is, I'm great, but not for that person, place, or group. I asked the person asking the question to be more specific about what her conclusion is, like on a more personal level, and she said that I'm great but not the greatest, that I could be in class B, quote-unquote class B, but I'm not a quote-unquote class A kind of person. And I then look for lower than the best, like quote-unquote my own level. Let's say for camp, so I would apply to a top camp, but then I would, after rejection, I would look for a camp that is not that good. So here's what I want to say about this, and there's going to be a long introduction, so please bear with me. There's an expression in English. We say beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. What does this mean? It means that beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty is according to how the person sees it. Beauty is subjective. It's not absolute. It's not a fact. Different people could have different opinions, so it's not a fact. For example, if I have a leaning, if I appreciate the color blue, if I think that the color blue is the ideal color, then when I see a blue dress, I'm going to think it's beautiful. It's really my personal preference, my personal ideal, but it's not a fact. Some people think that light-colored skin, like very pale, is beautiful. Some people think red hair is beautiful. My grandmother used to think that she came from Russia, and she thought that red hair was a terrible thing to have. Some people think it's beautiful. I think it's beautiful. Some people think darker skin and darker hair is the ideal. Whatever you think is beautiful, that will impact your decisions about what is beautiful, right? Because beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. But when you see something, you're not putting the whole equation through your mind. You just take it as a fact. This is beautiful. I love it. Or this is ugly and I don't like it. To me, it's a fact, but in reality, it's not a fact. It's just my opinion. It's changeable. It's totally dependent on my view. Now, we said this about beauty, but just like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, so too value is in the eyes of the beholder. That means good or bad have different meanings to different people. And good or bad is also relative. There's a famous, it's like a folk story. You might have seen this in kids' books. It's one of these, I think, in one of the kids' books that many people are familiar with, that a guy in the shtetl had a young son who went, let me think 1 second, what happened? He went on a horse, and the kid went, but something happened before the horse. Basically, his horse got lost, And everyone was saying, oy vey, what a schreckliche thing. It's such a terrible thing, such a bad thing. And the farmer said, good, bad, what do we know? And then the horse came back with another few other wild horses. And everyone said, wow, such a mazel de kazak, good to mazel, such a good thing. And the farmer said, good, bad, what do we know? And then his son was riding on the horse, on one of the new horses, and he fell off and he got hurt very badly in both of his legs. And he had to be bandaged up and laid up in bed. And everybody in the shtetl felt so bad for him. They said, oh, it's such a terrible thing, such a sad thing. And the farmer said, good, bad, what do we know? Everything is from Hashem. And a couple of days later, soldiers came through the town looking for all the young boys. And when they came to this farmer's house, their young son, their teenager, who had been horse riding, was all bandaged up and in bed, and they saw that there was no way they could take him. So he was spared from being taken away to the Tsar's army unwillingly. So, and everyone said, wow, that's the most amazing thing. Isn't that the most amazing thing in the world? Is that the best thing in the world? And the farmer still said, good, bad, what do we know? Right? So in each of these stories, it was a bad thing, if we want to say the word according to the language that most people in the world use, you could say that is a bad thing for somebody to fall off a horse and hurt themselves. But relatively to the value of being taken away to the Tsar's army for the rest of his life, it's a good thing. It saved his life. So beauty is not just in the eyes of the beholder. Value is in the eyes of the beholder. And value is not just in the eyes of the beholder. It's always relative. It's not absolute. It's not a fact. It's not definite. It's always changeable. That's how the world works. So good or bad have different meanings to different people. For example, some people might value money very much, and for such a person, to be rich is good, the ultimate good, and to be poor is the ultimate bad. If approval is everything, then to be accepted is good, to be rejected is bad. So from this perspective, can we say that something is truly beautiful or that something is truly good or bad? No, right? Because like the farmer said, good, bad, what do we know? It's only relative. It depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on who's looking. It depends on what we're comparing it to. It's not absolutely good. It's not factually good. Is it beautiful? I don't know. It depends who's looking at it. Is it good? Well, it depends for what. Bad? It depends how, right? So beauty, good, bad, value, more, less, these value systems are not facts. These are words we throw around as our own assessments of things in our lives, but they're not facts. Now, just like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, by the way, if anybody has, I hope you're with me because I can't see you, so I hope you're following. If you're not, if you're unclear, if I'm not making sense to you, press *1 and tell me. Just like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, my personal beauty, your personal beauty, my personal value is also in the eyes of the beholder, right? And that kind of beauty and that kind of value is also not absolute. It's only subjective to one person or to many people's opinions. It's not factually true. It's only relatively true to specific people, to a specific culture, to specific circumstances. 1 second. Okay, so in the beginning, when we spoke about our beliefs and values, this is what we were talking about, right? I feel like I want to revisit what we were talking about because now you're going to understand it in a different way, in the context of what we're talking about now. We live in a world, right? You learn, you go to seminary, you go to school, you go to seminary, and you learn Torah is the best schera. Torah is the best thing ever. The most important thing in the world is Hashem and mitzvahs and Torah and all that. You go on the streets, and we live in a world, and not even in the streets of Manhattan. We're talking about the streets in our own from neighborhoods. We live in a world that values money, approval, external looks as values, and we take that on as our own value system. We take it as if it's factual reality. This is how it is. It's how it is. You're a better person if you live in a better house, if your father has a better position, if your mother has a better position, if you have better looks, if you have better money, better approval, better acceptance, better grades, right? We live in a system, in a world that has some sort of understanding about this. You're a better person if you get into better camps, better schools, better jobs, and ultimately better shidduchim, right? I call this way of thinking otherness. Why? Because it's an other value. It's a measuring stick that's other from the truth, really. It's not absolute value. We treat it as if it's the truth. Really? It's just American culture. It's not absolute truth. It's certain people's opinions. It's beauty in the eyes of certain beholders. And maybe it's beauty in the eyes or value in the hands of many people's beholders. It's 100% not absolute. It's not truth. It's not a fact. So what happens if we take on that measuring stick? It's really just people's opinions, and we treat it as if it's truth. What happens is that we get picked up and pushed down in ways that causes us so much chaos and heartache. So I'm not saying that, again, so when I talk about this I used to talk about this in adult groups, we're also adults here, we're young adults, but I'm saying in women's groups, people would say, okay, get real, this is how it is, this is how the world works. Okay, so in that place where this is how the world works, it's also normal to be stressed, miserable, resentful, angry, annoyed, frustrated, and anxious all the time. So we're trying to find a way, like, to get to the root of it. So I think that, obviously there is room to say that if enough people have a certain value system, then you will be in some way, b'derech hateva, impacted by that value system. But let's put that aside for a second, okay? Let's look at it from a different perspective. We know that truth is a safe zone. When we're in the zone of truth, we're good, we're healthy, we're strong, we're wholesome. When we're in the zone of lies, once we start believing a lie, that's the opposite of healthy and safe and wholesome. It's unhealthy, it's unsafe, and ultimately leads to instability and anxiety and all kinds of all kinds of other undesirable emotions, undesirable realities. So even if we just look at this value system in its eye and say, okay, this has a place, it's relatively true for those people, or relatively true for American culture, relatively true for this particular community. But to think that it's true, absolutely true, factually true, and relate to it as if it's true, to use it to measure our personal value, that's a lie. And anytime we buy into a lie, we ultimately are going to be hurt, right? Because truth is safe and healthy. The opposite of truth is unsafe and unhealthy. So if we take other people's opinions as absolutely true, or even if there's a large group of people's opinion as absolutely true, we are bound to hurt ourselves and other people by those opinions. Now, there's one kind of beauty in this world that is not dependent on the eyes of the beholder. This beauty is truly always beautiful. It's absolute. It's not beautiful depending on if people like it. It doesn't depend on anything or anyone. It's truly beautiful and good and wholesome and perfect. Not a kind of good that's subjective. It never changes. Absolute goodness, it's true goodness, it's lasting goodness. And because it's true, if we use this as our actual measuring system, we can be happy people because it's a true system. It's true goodness. It's lasting goodness. It doesn't have an expiration date. If we use measuring sticks that are broken to measure ourselves, we get a wrong reading. And we might feel broken when we're really whole. And we might feel whole when we're really very broken. We would do broken things without realizing, or we would do healthy things and beautiful things without embracing it, without accepting it, without feeling good about it. So if we want to measure ourselves in a healthy way, we want to use a true measuring stick, one that actually gives us an accurate reading. And if we want to know whether or not we're good, we want to measure ourselves by a good that's absolutely good. We need to use beauty that's not dependent on the eyes of the beholder, beauty that's beauty, true value, absolute, unchanging, lasting, forever kind of value. And what's this the ultimate definition of good? By now you for sure know where I'm getting at. What's the only true good? It's Hashem, right? Hashem is the only absolute goodness. Hashem is good in a way that doesn't depend on anybody's opinions, right? External beauty is always dependent on the eyes of the beholder, which means it could change. It's always going to be different for different people. And the same thing with value. How good you are, good, better, worse. It's going to always be in the eyes of the beholder, which means it could change. You're a better person today, according to that person. You're going to be a better person, a worse person for the same thing in another person's eyes the next day for exactly the same quality. Some people will love you because you're exuberant. Some people will find your exuberance annoying. Some people will value your ability to sing. Some people will find that irksome. Will find that, oh, you're flighty. Some people will value you for your art. And some people will say, oh, I just don't relate to artists. So you're if we judge ourselves by other people's opinions, and on a deeper level, if I'm a good person because I'm liked, and I'm a not good person because I'm disliked, that's a broken measuring stick. That means that a part of my brain is always going to be babysitting other people's responses towards me so that I can get an accurate reading, which is really an inaccurate reading, but I can get the current reading of how worthy I am. I used to do that. I would read other people's faces like a stockbroker, right? Stocks go up, stocks go down. Here I'm valued, I'm not valued. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm ugly, I'm pretty, I'm socially smart, I'm socially awkward. Depends on how people like me. We take on labels based on how people respond to us. And that's dangerous because I think it's self-explanatory why it's dangerous, because it's a lack of, you don't have that essential security. Your goodness depends on other people, and you don't have, that means your inner self, your inner well-being is totally out of control. You have no say. It's like, that's why I called it a roller coaster. It's like you're going on a ride, up, down, wherever you're pulled, whatever people like you, they don't like you. Obviously, if you're smart, you figure out what gets people to like you, but then is that really a way to live when so much of our mind, because everybody wants to be loved. It's a basic human need to belong, to be wanted, to be accepted. It's a human need. So if I'm not feeling essentially accepted, then a part of my brain is always going to be figuring out what I need to do to get accepted, to be valued, to be considered good enough. And then that takes away from really living with my whole heart and my whole self. So Hashem's beauty or Hashem's value, Hashem's goodness is l'chai olamim. It's forever. It's unchangeable, untouchable, regardless of any beholder. Even if the beholder doesn't think Hashem is good, Hashem is still good. The beholder doesn't change Hashem's value. People don't change Hashem's value because Hashem's value is a fact. It's not a value that's dependent on people. It's not relative. It's not changeable. It doesn't depend on people's moods. It's an absolute fact, absolute value. Right? Even if somebody, let's say you say, okay, well, it's very nice. I value Hashem, so I'm going to value myself because I have a neshama. But what if people don't value Hashem the way I do? It's okay. It doesn't change the fact. A tree is a tree, even if people think it's a donkey. It's still a tree. It doesn't change the fact that it's a tree. Even if the beholder doesn't think Hashem is important, Hashem is still important. In the Sefer HaTanya, many times, the Baal Tanya uses the words good and bad. Specifically, a lot of times there's a word bad. And many people, it's like, oh my, I'm Russia, Ra, there's so much evil. And when we think of the word evil, we think of evil in terms of what's evil in our eyes. We think of monsters, murders, murderous things, long nails and mean, ugly, really, really nasty, bad acts or deeds or people. But when the Baal Tanya uses the words good and bad, he doesn't mean that at all. Because Hashem is the only absolute goodness, right? So when the Baal Tanya uses the words good and bad, he only means one thing. Good and bad. Good is connection to Hashem. Bad is disconnection from Hashem. You want to know what's good? Connection to Hashem. You want to know what's bad? Disconnection from Hashem. So when we want to measure how we are doing in our lives, who am I? I want to evaluate if something is a good choice or a bad choice. The only real measuring stick is connection or disconnection. Any other measuring stick is going to give you a false reading. Why is it going to give you a false reading? Because it's going to depend. It's going to depend on who you ask. It's going to depend on which, what mood that person is. It's not absolute. It's changing. It's dependent. It's relative. The only absolute value, the only reading, the only measuring stick or measuring tape that always gives you an accurate, consistent, authentic, unchangeable reading is connection or disconnection. You're closer to Hashem or you're further away. So with that long introduction, it was actually almost a half hour, let's go back to the question and let's answer the question using the same language we just used. And I know you're all aware I don't usually spend this much time on a question, but I feel like I'm sure this is on other people's minds, and this is where it's at. This is where the most important work is. When you realize this one thing, you don't have to join the rest of if you get this, you don't have to join the rest of the next 2 weeks because you're really good for life. So let's go back to that. Let's go back to this question. The question is it fair to say, is it true to say that I'm great but not the greatest, that I could be in what we're going to call class B, but I'm not a class A kind of person? And this is really an important question because if I think of myself as a class B person, I'm always going to look for class B in everything in my life, whether it's a job, whether it's friends, whether it's a boss, whether it's, a profession, whether it's a home, whether it's a shidduch. So if I think of myself as a class B person, I'm going to look for lower than the best, right? And the person who asked the question gave the example of going to camp, but the same thinking would apply to any area of our life. So here's my thought on this idea, just using the same language. When we talk about ourselves as if we are on different levels, I'm on this level, that level. I'm this great. I'm not the greatest. I'm good. I'm not really good. I'm good enough. I'm 80% good. I'm 90% good. I'm 70% good. All of that is broken, unreliable measuring tape. It's otherness. It's measuring tape of the world. It's not true. And I'm calling it broken. The reason why I'm calling it broken is because that's taking relative, changeable, subjective values and applying it as if it's absolute. So in this specific case, let's say I experienced rejection, or somebody tells me, you're really not that wonderful, you're not the greatest, you're just great, but you're not the greatest, right? What I'm doing is I'm taking someone else's opinion, or I'm using an experience of rejection to prove something very deep about me, to prove something about my value. That's a broken equation with a broken measuring stick. From the perspective of Hashem's presence within us, each of us has absolute value, unchangeable. And that's the measuring stick we want to be using, not just in theory, but for real. So that means letting go of classifying ourselves in Class A or Class B. Who made these classifications? Who do they belong to? It's not consistent with Tanya. It's not consistent with our Emunah and Bitachon in Hashem. It's not consistent. It's like Eliyahu Navi said to Bnei Yisrael, Ad Masai Atem. How long are you going to sit on the fence? Are you going to use Hashem? If Hashem is true, then Hashem is everything, and Hashem is true in every way, and it would make sense, the fact that we all believe in Hashem, to rely on Hashem's value as our value system, as the rock, as the bedrock, as the foundation, as the core, the centerpiece of our value system, especially in terms of how we value ourselves and other people, right? In the rest of the world, they use all kinds of other value systems. You're valued by looks. You're valued by how much you impress people. What kind of presentation do you make? What does it look like in the bigger picture all together, right? That's nothing. The more we buy into other values, the more we're going to be impacted by them, and the more chaos and resentment and misery we invite into our lives. Why? For one simple reason. It's not true. It's not true. And the fact that it's not true will eventually cause chaos, even if it seems to be working. Like we said last week on Thursday, even if it seems to be working, if it's diesel, ultimately it breaks the engine. The only true classification is more connection to Hashem versus less connection to Hashem. When you talk about a vacuum cleaner, there's a good vacuum cleaner, a better one, and the best one. You talk about jewelry, yeah, there's Class A, there's Class B. Talk about a house, Class A, Class B. People, and certainly Yidden, cannot be classified. You cannot be classified. Okay, so in school you were classified. Your teachers classified you. Your seminary classified you. The Shadchanim are going to classify you. That's the challenge of living in Galus. The world will classify us, but we dare not classify ourselves if Hashem matters to us. Your choices could be classified. When you do something that connects you with Hashem, or that connects you with the part of Hashem within you, call it good. Embrace it, even if it's not popular. If it connects you with Hashem, if it connects you with your neshama, with the part of Hashem within you, great. It's good. When you disconnect, it's not good. Even if it feels good, even if people like it, even if you like it, disconnecting from Hashem is not good. So whenever we talk about this in other groups, people say, okay, so practically speaking, what should I do if someone rejects me? So my personal advice is to not try crawling into people's heads. Don't try to figure out what they're thinking. Obviously, if you keep experiencing a lot of rejection, or even one rejection that's important to you, you want to share it with someone you trust and ask for an objective opinion about what do I need to know to grow from this experience? What can I learn? It's very healthy to be able to take criticism, but don't take it as a judgment on your value. Maybe take it as something you can learn. Okay, I could learn something. We could always learn something, but it doesn't make me better or worse. Nothing could make me better or worse. Nothing can. We have such an obsession with trying to be a better person. You can't be better than yourself. How could you be better than yourself? You're already the best. By virtue of the fact that Hashem is in you, you can't be better than yourself. The only thing you could do is let your best self show up a little bit more than it did yesterday. Let your better self, your best self, your awesome self show up right now with greater force than it did yesterday. Be more connected to yourself. Be more connected to your true value. Be more connected to Hashem, to what makes you wonderful and beautiful eternally and unchangeably. But you're not going to change your value. You'll always be equally valuable. There's no such thing as a good Jew and a better Jew. There's no such thing. So don't classify yourself. There's no such thing as a class A person or a class B person. There's no such thing as the best or the greatest. Each of us needs to show up in the most ideal way that we can, with our best self shining forth, with choices that connect us to Hashem, with choices that demonstrate our connection with our neshama. And if you're looking for a camp or a school or a friend or a chavrusa, a learning partner, or a shidduch, that's the lens to use. That's the measuring stick that works. Look for an environment where you could connect. Look for a place where the leaders are connected. And in shidduchim, look for a person who has real Yireh Shamayim, a person who also seeks to connect with Hashem. Don't worry about getting the best. Those are all just names. They're nothing. They're the best on the street is very, very often not the best in real life. Those labels are meaningless. And if you use it as a real measuring system, it's destructive. I feel like I'm going on and on and on. But if anybody has questions, I could still go on because this is obviously a very, very a huge topic for me, in case anybody didn't notice. One second. I see somebody texted. Is there a difference in value from a boy neshama or a girl neshama? Since girls are considered mikabel, that is the level under mashpia. It's interesting, but in a certain sense, I'm not an expert on the value of neshamas, higher neshamas, lower neshamas. I don't think that there is, but if anything, it says when Mashiach comes that Ishes Chayil Ateres Bailo, was that what we learned, right? That we're going to see ultimately a woman's neshama a woman has certain spiritual qualities. I don't know the neshama. A woman has certain spiritual qualities that are higher than the male. But this is not about, again, it's not about good or better, because what's better, apples or oranges? You need to be the best apple you could be, and that person needs to be the best orange they could be. What's better, an apple or an orange? Sometimes you need an apple, sometimes you need an orange. If the recipe calls for orange and you only have an apple, then it could be the most best, shiniest, reddest, juiciest apple, but it's not an orange. I don't eat it now. And likewise, if you're making an apple pie, you can have the most perfect, juicy, wonderful, sweet orange, fresh off the tree, but it's not. So each of us has our unique purpose in the world between male and female, and I don't think we need to worry about good, better, or best over there. It's more of, let me be the best I could be. If anyone else has any questions, either press *1. That's the best, if you can speak up. So I know that you hear me, you get it, or you can text. I just want to.
It's really clear. Thanks so much.
Oh, yay. Hi. Thank you. Thank you. My brave friend, whoever you are. I don't know who you are, but thank you. That was brave of you. Okay. So I want to share one way that it's destructive when we use a measuring system that's not true. When we use other people's opinions as the value system to really define us, right? Let's say I'm a person. I want to think, first of all, everybody wants to be the best. If there's a best, I want to be the best I could be. I don't want to just be the best I could be. I want to be the best, right? If there's good, better, and best, I'm smart enough to want to be the best. Now, everybody wants to be the best. So what are we doing? We're putting subconsciously, I think in a certain sense, that's why people love gossip. We love gossip. There's a part of us that loves hearing. We have a morbid obsession with hearing bad stuff about other people. And I think part of the reason is because we know ourselves that we're not as great as we want to be, meaning we're not showing up with the kind of character traits that we really admire. We're not. So if I'm not going to be the best, at least I'm better than her. At least I'm better than that person. Oh my goodness. Could you imagine? There's something about it that makes us feel good. But beyond that, I know myself that until I owned my absolute value, and I thought I only had relative value, that means relative to other people's opinions, and I didn't own my absolute value, whenever somebody would point out a fault to me, if they would criticize me, how did I respond? I defended myself automatically. I went into fight or flight. No way, that's not true. You didn't understand. Oh, or if they would compliment me on something that I did, yeah, I could have really done better. I just did it in a rush. Really? No, I spent actually 5 hours on it. But you know what I mean? I had to be better than myself. If somebody criticized me, I had to defend myself. Subconsciously, I know that if I have this fault, if I take on this person's judgment of me, that means I'm not the greatest. And I want to be the greatest. Which person doesn't? So I'm going to defend myself. I won't be able to look at myself with honesty. I won't be able to see. I'll be so upset, so insulted, so hurt. I won't be able to look at myself with honesty. I won't be willing to own my weaknesses and even my strengths. If I think I'm the greatest, if I need to be the greatest, I'm not leaving myself room to grow. I'm not able to own my greatness because I'm always comparing myself to people who are better than me in this particular way, and it makes me worried and anxious. Oh, maybe I'm not good enough because look how she does that, and look how I own, So, okay, 1 minute. Here's a good question. Practically, if I'm feeling low in myself and I'm judging myself based on what others think of me, how do I change my whole mindset? Again, practically, if I'm feeling low about myself and I'm judging myself based on what other people think of me, how do I change my whole mindset? Okay, if we would be in a room, I would ask somebody else to answer the question. I'm still asking somebody else to answer the question. If anybody could share an answer, what you think, press *1. Okay, I think everybody's being a little shy, but everybody could answer this on some level, right?
I think you just think
yes.
about the value of your neshama. Just think about Hashem and think about
Yay.
Think about it.
Thank you. Yay. That makes me happy. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you asked this question because it tells me that you're thinking and you're getting the gist of how huge, how important this is, how beneficial it could be for you. So this is great. So at the end of the day, if Hashem is abstract to me, then my neshama and my worthiness and my absolute value will be abstract. Is that do you hear what I'm saying? As to the extent that Hashem is real and tangible and alive and relevant, that's how much Hashem's value within me is going to be real, alive, and relevant and practical. When people used to tell me, Hashem, it's just my Amunah and Bitachon, it's just not practical. I'm like, I used to say, yeah, it's takanat. It's, it's only in your mind, but the work, you have to think about it. But I realized that it's very practical to the extent that you practice it, right? Practical comes from the word practice, or they don't come from each other, but they're definitely related to each other. The more you practice it in action, the more practical the value of Hashem becomes in your life. So practically, how do we practice it? How do we do this? I think there's really only one way, and this way comes in many forms. Although next week in Mirz Hashem, not next week, we were going to do this today, but then I saw this question and I realized this is more important. But in Mirz Hashem on Thursday, I'm going to go through a list of just little practical ideas of how you could cross the bridge from it being theoretical to practical, the value, how you could change your mindset in a deeper way every day in little ways. But in one word, in one line, the one thing that has to happen and could happen starting today is spending time thinking about Hashem's value and making Hashem relevant. And then thinking about your neshama, and in the same context, recognizing and spending time thinking about how your neshama is relevant. If we don't think about it, we won't feel it. The more we think about it, and not just in a way of listening to this discussion, but when you hang up the phone, to really reflect and say, what does that really mean to me? What are my thoughts on that? What does that look like in context of the struggle that I'm facing with? How does my neshama make a difference to the challenge I dealt with today? You know that phone call you had to make? You know that interview you had to deal with? You know that letter that you got, the text, whatever it is? You know that friend that you had that issue with? Whatever. Everyone has stuff going on. Think about, what does my value, what is your value, what is my value, what is my neshama's value make a difference? In what way does my neshama's value make a difference to me and how I deal with that situation? How am I going to be different? Yeah, go ahead.
I think that it's also very important to learn about Hashem, because the more you learn about it, the more you understand, and automatically you think about it more, and because you understand more, it's just easier to connect to it.
100%. But even if you think about Hashem, even if you learn about Hashem and it's only academic, it's only intellectual, but you never personalize it, some people are more, right, so some people are more intellectual, they need a lot of information, and some people, even without being intellectual, just spending time thinking about what you already know. Like if everybody on this phone, if you have if you had to go into a 4th grade classroom tomorrow and teach them who Hashem is, let's say, what would you say? Everybody would have 10 lines what to tell them. Hashem is good, Hashem is loving, whatever you know about Hashem, you would be able to say. And if you just think about those things that you already know, it's already good. The most amazing exercise that you could do to do this is to say Adonai Lam with a Yiddish translation or with an English translation, with whichever language you're more comfortable with, and literally read it linearly, like Adonai Lam, read what you're saying. It's unbelievably powerful. Just to, as you're saying Adonai Lam every day, try it for 1 week. Like it's a fail-proof, guaranteed method for changing how you feel and the relevance of Hashem in your life, and ultimately the relevance of your neshama in your life. Because then when you say Maida'ani in the morning, or you say Elokai neshama shenasata bi tahirahi, like it means something. When I was really making the connection, making my own connections, like the ideas that I'm talking about now, I remember like walking down the street and saying, I think was like the most common word I said in my own journey. Yeah. So in the first parak of Tanya, the Baal Tanya asked, how should I look at myself, right? How should I look at myself? Because I think it's because it's so important that that's how the whole Sefer Tanya begins. And actually, the whole Shulchan Aruch also begins with courage. The entire Shulchan Aruch, the first seif of the first Sefer in Shulchan Aruch includes this line, Al Yivash Miprei, don't be embarrassed of those who mock you. That means the same idea, like don't take on other people's judgments of you. Just be you, shine, go for it, be yourself. So the first parak of Tanya, the Baal Tanya, how should I look at myself? He asks. If I see myself as a bad person, I'm going to feel bad. But I know that I'm not good enough. I know I'm not a tzaddik. If I see myself as a rasha, I'm going to feel bad. If I see myself as a bad person, I'm going to feel bad. But I know I'm not a tzaddik. I know I'm not good enough. So who am I? How should I see myself? And he doesn't answer right away, but he does say, take on a whole new definition of good and bad. Take on a new paradigm. Throw out the world's definitions of good and bad. Just throw it out. Let it go. There's only one good, and that's Hashem. Let Hashem be your only, or at least your most foundational measure of goodness. And with that, know that because you have a neshama, you are a person who has the greatest potential. You have infinitely precious value. And yet, you could also be disconnected from your value. So are you great or the greatest? From the perspective of Hashem's emes, from the perspective of Hashem's infinite, unchangeable value, you're always, always, always the absolute greatest. You're never less. You're never not good enough. You're always beautiful, no matter what any person says or does or thinks, right? Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but that's only external beauty. True beauty is in the eyes of Hashem. And true beauty is absolute. So the only question is really, how are you showing up today? Or in what way are you showing up? Are you connecting or disconnecting? It's a whole different paradigm. So one more question here. Regarding things not being factually bad, does that apply to things like abuse and dysfunction, or does that fall under things that are against Hashem, so is bad? If it's bad, how does that work with Emunah of knowing that Hashem is only good, so everything is good? Okay, so look, because I want to clarify something. I'm so happy you asked this question, and we'll close with this. Any action that's against Hashem's will is bad. If it disconnects us from Hashem, it's bad. So an abuse of power is bad. Abusing another person is bad. Because if bad equals disconnecting from Hashem, doing something that Hashem doesn't want, abuse is bad. Maintaining, perpetuating dysfunction is bad. Or I would say imposing dysfunction on others, it's bad. It's not what Hashem wants. It's disconnecting. It's disconnected from your true self. It's disconnected from Hashem. It's not what Hashem wants. So I don't know if that answers the question. At the same time, that's part of the question, because I think that you're connecting it to personal value. So you're not saying it, but I think that you're connecting it to personal value. How does that impact me? If bad was done to me, then how does that reflect on my value? You're not asking that question, but in case you are, if that's on your mind, or if that's on anybody's mind, we have layers in ourselves. You know, there's our skin, there's what other people see, there's our personalities, what we feel, our inner struggles. And then there's a part of us that's untouchable and unknowable to others. Knowable to others. It's our soul, and it's entirely pure and holy. And I use the word untouchable because even if something bad, even if a person was abused, their soul wasn't touched. So I see the path to healing. You know, obviously it's important on some level to, you know, to identify what was wrong and the shame and let go of the shame, but I identify it as somebody else's shame and to say this was wrong. At the same time, I think that true healing begins when we look at ourselves and see there's a part of me that was never touched. I'm going to tap into that, and I'm going to live from that place. I'm going to engage in my life from that place. And with that, I'm able to separate what was done to me from me. That's not me. That's just, you know, I'll never forget when I remember how old I was, but I must have been, I don't know, maybe 10. And I was in camp, an overnight camp. Maybe I was 11 years old. And I was in overnight camp, and one time the toilet was stuffed. And one of the brave girls in our bunk took a plunger and went to the toilet and was dealing with it. And she was sticking that plunger in and out. And a whole ring of girls was standing around her and saying, "Gross, disgusting, ew," as girls will do. "Ew, disgusting." And they were carrying on. And all of a sudden, she took that plunger, she threw it on the floor. She got so upset. She threw it on the floor. She said, "I'm not gross, that's gross." And that moment very much stayed in my mind. And I think that if all of us can look at different experiences that happened in our lives and say, "I'm not gross, that's gross. I'm not bad, that was bad. I'm not wrong, that was wrong." Whether I did it, whether someone else did it, whether I did it to myself, whether someone else did it to me, doesn't matter. I am not bad, that was bad. Because I am good. I am entirely pure, and I can live from that place. And when we do that, or the more we can do that, the more health we can bring and invite into our lives, no matter what else went on, no matter what else is going on. All right, my dear friends, it's been real. I can't believe that I think it was we didn't do what I originally said we would do last on Thursday night, but I think I hope that this was helpful in some other way. And in Mirza Hashem on Thursday, we'll come back and go through that list I've been talking about of more ways that we can just, you know, connect with our awesome, untouchably valuable, infinite, precious, all that part of ourselves. So I want to wish everyone a wonderful week ahead, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You realize who it is?
I'm sorry?
You realize who it is?
I don't, actually. Everybody's voices sounds different. I'm not hearing
Esty.
Voices. Oh, hi, Esty. How would I know? I never heard your voice.
You did.
Now I did.
In the Tanya class.
Oh, right.
That Esty.
Right, okay.
Anyway,
Okay, thank you.
Really good.
Thank you for saying hi. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Esty. Thank you, everybody. A good Nacht. Take care.